Hello, faithful listener, it's me, Charlie. This week we're doing the Twilight Saga, and just as I was editing it, I realised that we didn't properly give an accurate trigger warning around 53 to 58 minutes, where we do briefly touch on sexual violence, traumatic pregnancy, and child loss. So if that is something that's problematic for you, either skip over or listen to one of our older, less touchy episodes. Enjoy!
Did your Amazon costume come?
Yeah. Well, my stuff to make my costume has come.
Are you going to make it?
Yeah.
What is it again?
I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
It's either going to be terrible or it's going to be amazing.
I'm
Either way, it's
excited.
going to be completely ridiculous.
I'm excited. Twofold now. Nice.
Hello, beautiful viewers, blah.
That was great. That was definitely making it into the introduction. Hello, and welcome back to the Vampire Book Club. Woo!
Woo!
We've been away for so long. I remember the last episode we were like, we'll definitely be back within the next 2 weeks, and then left it longer than we've ever left it
Crickets.
But we're finally back, people, and it's Halloween! Yay!
Yay!
So happy Halloween. I'm furiously going to be editing this after we finish and hopefully get it out on the same day, and if not, then you'll be listening to this the day after Halloween, in which case it's a 2-day holiday this year. This is the Halloween episode.
Stay spooky.
Yeah, and today we're not doing Dracula like we promised,
Which is formulaic.
just vibing with our chaotic energy. We will do Dracula at some point, but we're not going to do it today because, I don't know, Jamie just didn't want to do it, and then dangled the carrot of Twilight, and I couldn't say no. So we will come back to Dracula if you were really looking forward to that. But today we're just going to be talking a very chill, unprepped look at the Twilight Saga, which I'm very excited about, because these books are the reason that I want to do this podcast in the first place. But yeah, and it's also our first vampire book.
It is. Finally a vampire.
Yeah, we're named the Vampire Book Club and we've done no vampires yet, so it's first all round.
It is.
Very exciting. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about Twilight. And part of that reason is because I think that Twilight's interesting in terms of, like, its cultural relevance, because people kind of, like, it's so kind of crazily well known, and was, like, you know, if you say, like, sparkly vampires or, like, Team Edward versus, like, Team Jacob,
Visceral reactions.
yeah, like, people know what you're talking about. And it's the first thing to really reinvent the vampire in, like, the culture imagination to that extent, like, since Dracula. And yet people just don't take it seriously at all. And so today we're gonna, I hesitate to say we'll be taking it seriously, but we'll be taking it slightly more seriously. And so, yeah. Shall we very briefly do, like, a broad overview of...
I feel like that's the best idea. The greatest idea.
Okay, Jamie, what happens in Twilight in the most simple way you can possibly put it?
A teenage girl falls in love with a 100-year-old vampire who also happens to look like a teenage boy. Hijinks ensue in which she doesn't mind that she's constantly on the verge of being eaten by him, whilst he tells her how bloody delicious she smells constantly. Another group of vampires encroach on the teenage boy vampires who I've forgotten, you know, he lives I'm doing great, this is good, and he's got a family of vampires that he lives with, all of which masquerade under the cover of being siblings that date. And yeah, they have their territory, and then another group of vampires encroach on their territory. Bella's life is in peril because, again, she's just so goddamn delicious to every vampire that she runs up on, and then they I don't even know where they drive. There's like a road trip. There's a road trip. There's a road trip montage. Then she gets thrown against several mirrors, and then gets bitten, and then the poison gets sucked out of her. I don't actually. And then she goes to prom at the end. So it's a great ending for all.
Followed by 3 books in which very little else happens.
The formula is just kind of regurgitated, but with, as she gets older, you know,
like constant obstacles, like arbitrarily thrown in front of them that aren't really that bigger obstacles.
They're just sort of like plot material to put Edward and Jacob sort of like at odds or like competing for Bella's very boring hand in marriage. And
a lot of it is quite drawn out. I mean, in New Moon, like all that happens is literally like Edward goes away, and then right at the end of the book, Bella goes after him.
And we just get, you know, lots of filler information about Jacob having the worst puberty of his life, which turns out to be lycanthropy, so...
Yeah. You want me to put you in the hospital?
Poor Mike!
Oh, Mike. Oh, blessed Mike. So yeah, that's a very brief overview. I mean, if you don't know what it's about, then where have you been, frankly? But that's what we're going to talk about today. And so we're going to start with Bella Swan. And to do this, I thought it would be fun to look at what the internet and like the culture around Twilight thinks of Bella Swan.
This was last updated March 9th, 2021 as well.
So, oh my god. So, yeah, no, I checked the Twilight Wiki fandom page. And it's regularly having contributions. I mean, people are still coming up with fan theories.
It's so interesting as a saga because obviously it was a cultural moment in, I would say, the 2000s, but like it's recently had like a real resurgence because of like TikTok, I think, as well, and like Twitter amongst the young people, the youth of today.
Well, yeah, it's quite interesting because like it was like I remember it coming out and it was so popular.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like became sort of uncool, and then people kind of like, you know, who had sort of grown up reading it in their like early teenagers like me, were introduced to feminism and then were kind of like, oh my god, like this is so bad, and then kind of like got over that.
Yeah.
It's now come back to it with a renewed appreciation, and so it has this really lasting endurance. But being like Bella, part 1, okay. So, yeah, just editing this and I realised I forgot to actually mention that we are looking at the WikiHow, how to be like Bella Swan. Number 1, have confidence in your desires, no matter what the outcome is. Bella doesn't have a very high self-esteem, but she still has the confidence to stick up for herself and what she believes in. But beware, you may end up with the consequences, like near death from pregnancy. She's often described as stubborn, especially by Edward. Do you think this is true?
I feel like she is a stubborn character, for sure. I think that is she self-conscious?
Extremely.
I feel like she is self-conscious. I don't know, I guess it is true. I guess I would say that I agree with that WikiHow's assessment of Bella Swan in the first point.
I do like the way that they've turned it around.
Yeah, I like that. Have confidence in your desires no matter what the outcome is. Like, we can all learn from this.
Yeah, just like, you know, the reality of what she's doing, which is like, I was about to say being a dick. She's not being a dick.
No.
She's being quite like throughout a lot of it, she's like, oh, but I want to help, and so I'm going to actively put myself in danger instead of just doing the sensible thing. And they're all like, why are you doing this, you idiot? I like that spin on it.
Me too.
The next one, 2, be clumsy, weak, frail, and accident prone. If you want to truly act like Bella, this is actually pretty important. Don't fall or break things on purpose, of course, but if you do trip or fall, shake it off and don't worry about it. Why? What? I don't know how that applies to like Bella Swan specifically.
Yeah.
Like if you trip or fall, like don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Some advice there. Bella is also described as being extremely non-athletic, which sort of ties in with the clumsiness. This is really true, and this is one of the things about Bella that actually genuinely frustrates me about the way that Stephenie Meyer portrays her.
Yeah.
You know, there's a bit, guys, in the famous bit where she's like being chased in, where are they? They're not in Seattle. They're in the other Portland. When they go shopping for their prom dresses, and Bella breaks away from the crowd and is chased by like these potential murderers / rapists. She's like clearly like she knows she's in danger from her life, and yet is kind of like, well, I can't run because I'll just fall over. Like she's that accident prone, like that she's willing to like
just walk quickly.
She's like, I should walk as quickly as possible without tripping over. I couldn't run because I knew I'd just fall over. And it's like, I genuinely don't believe that anyone is that accident prone.
No.
If their life was threatened, they wouldn't try and run.
Yeah, like how? I imagine that she just sort of like gets ready in the morning by like tying her shoelaces together.
Step 3: assure your appearances as plain as possible, but stand there like you're already just pretty. I don't think she does that, but
no, I think it's in the way that probably like Stephenie is writing her into. It kind of does follow that formula of like she's plain but like hard as fuck. But I actually feel like that kind of like formula is more, they put that more into like her blood smells so good. So as opposed to like, oh, she's so physically beautiful, it's more like her blood
is so
smelly that physically she, I don't know, must be beautiful to these vampires. That's the way that I kind of, but you know, obviously.
Well, the thing is, like, because I've been reading Midnight Sun for my dissertation, like, she is hot, and like Edward like is completely like lamenting the fact that like he has to listen to like all the thoughts of like all the boys who are like, oh my god, she's so hot.
Oh really? Okay, Midnight Sun context.
But it's like it is literally only Bella's perception that she like feels really plain and like boring and ordinary. So this isn't incorrect, but the thing is, she is constantly worried about her looks, and this is something that's really like not made like like Stephenie Meyer really tries to brush over this in the same way that she really tries to brush over the fact that the Cullens are like fucking loaded, and she's always like, oh yeah, the Cullens had all this money in this massive house and like all these fancy cars, but like, oh, they didn't care about it, and it's like it's kind of like that. Like, we always get a description of Bella's wardrobe and what she's wearing, her hideous wardrobe. Yeah, she's always thinking about her clothes. She also notices Edward's clothes quite a lot.
She does. She's always got the pea coat. The pea coat haunts me.
That pea coat isn't in the book. Instead, I think in the book it's a brown leather jacket and a cream turtleneck.
Really?
Yeah, I believe so.
I feel like the peacoat is just such a part of the image of Edward I hold in my mind that I was like, yeah, the peacoat has to be in the books. Well, the peacoat has got to be part of the canon, the literary canon.
I do want to talk about it actually, because like the way that the films like really heavily influence our perception of the books. Like, I was really surprised like coming back to these and like reading them and being like, oh, that's not actually in the books. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. But like, she is like concerned with that. Like, that's what I was thinking. When Edward, like, when she discovers that Edward has been, like, breaking into her room at night to watch her sleep, she is immediately like, oh, well, I need to get some new pyjamas because my pyjamas are really, like, gross and, like, hideous. So she is, like, concerned, like, it's not, like, you know, Bella tries to make you believe that she doesn't care about her looks, but she does.
That is so frightening, the idea that you can't, you have to be constantly ready to be gazed upon, so therefore you can't even wear like some crappy pyjamas. Like, I feel like the pressure of being would kill me, I feel like.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, we'll get on to the fact that this maybe isn't the healthiest relationship to be when she's so constantly like anxious around him. But yeah, like also like in the opening of the book, she's like, oh, like I was wearing like my favourite top and blah blah blah. Like, she is like very concerned with the way she presents herself. So I think that is wrong, Smear. Oh yeah, she's also incredibly pale, which Stephenie Meyer makes a really, really... She's incredibly pale and incredibly thin. Like, the way Edward describes her in Midnight Sun is really, really weird and like uncomfortable.
Oh, really?
He's like, oh my god, she's so breakable. Oh my god, she's so delicate. I can snap them like a twig. Which, like, plays into... I mean, this was written in, like, 2006, which was, like, obviously, like, height of, like, problematic diet culture.
Yeah.
But it's just, I mean, the thing is also though, but she wrote Life and Death, and then Edith is described in exactly the same way in this really really skinny.
Oh, really? As in, like, Edith is this one this time that's, like...
Yeah, like, Bo's always like, oh my god, she's so strong, but, like, and then he describes, like, seeing her collarbones, and he can, like, see her ribs and stuff. And she's, like, so skinny and delicate.
But strong. But
really
physically
strong.
Yeah.
And it's like, well...
Whereas Bella literally, does look like she could be blown over. That's fucking crazy. I didn't know that, the books went to that length, again, because I can't super remember them, that length to describe how thin she was.
Well, yeah, I mean...
But it does make sense, because that was the look, wasn't it? Like, in 2006, that was the look.
Well, it's interesting because, like, Bella, I don't think ever describes herself in this way. It's only when we're seeing, like, Edward's perspective.
Yeah.
He, like, describes this to us, like, in Midnight Sun, which
Yeah.
came out in 2020. So, like, it's kind of like, she could have had literally any body up until that point. And considering she doesn't exercise, I really...
Yeah! She's supposed to be extremely unathletic.
Yeah,
like...
she can't even speed walk anywhere.
Yeah.
So, like,
God.
it's like there's a real problem around Bella's body.
And she likes to go and have blackberry cobbler with her dad on a Friday.
Yeah, she eats like quite a lot.
Yeah.
Like she's really skinny, also really pale, to the extent which is like thought to be pale enough for people to regularly comment
Be
on
like,
it.
you're pale. Yeah.
So, yeah, the one of the points here is be pale. So, remember to wash your face in the morning, guys, and at night, and wear sunscreen. And it recommends here that sunscreen will also stop you from getting skin cancer.
It also said, scroll up, it said, this really is not essential, especially if you have a darker skin tone.
Thanks. I love how this suddenly became like really easy.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's like in the books, it's obviously like there are no black vampires,
No.
and the film was like, oh, we've got to have some representation here. Okay, be a very introverted loner. Point number 4. Bella is a quiet and timid girl who loves silence. She's a lone wolf who hates, well, not, as it were, who hates attention and blending in with the crowd. If you are outgoing, however, you should not attempt to stifle such antics and realise that it is folly to even try to be anything that you're not.
They really said you can only, like, there is a biological element to being a Bella Swan. Like, if you just happen to have gone through sort of like, adolescence and turned out to be an extrovert, give up on your dreams. You will never be Bella Swan. You can never be Bella Swan. Do not stifle it, because folly
It's folly.
Yeah.
I love this
Folly is
attempt.
untoward.
I love this attempt to be like, don't change yourself. But also, if you want to be Bella Swan, you have to be really quiet and timid.
Exactly. Take that with a pinch of...
She is really quiet and timid. She's incredibly awkward and, like, doesn't seem to really know how to engage with people. Generally, my assessment of her is she's, like, a little bit, like, socially problematic. Yeah. Like, she doesn't really understand, like, how conversations work often. Is very rude to her friends regularly.
She is rude to her friends.
And so, yeah, she is a lone wolf. And a very introverted loner, because she just doesn't like people, which is fine.
But it's like Angela, I think is supposed to be pretty quiet as well, but like she's quiet in like a nice way that's like not self-involved. Or I think Bella is far more self-involved.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like in Midnight Sun, Edward, you obviously hear everyone's thoughts, and it's so silly. So Edward listens to all of Bella's like new friends' thoughts, and he's like, Angela's the only one who is like thinking something nice about Bella. I should pay her back for this in some way, and then proceeds to like stage this scenario to get Eric to ask her out on a date where he really loudly declares his intentions towards Angela.
Well, as in, like, Edward is like, oh, I love Angela.
Basically, yeah. He's like, he gets Emmett to help him out, and they're like sat in Spanish class, and they like have this plan. And Emmett's like, oh, like, are you gonna ask Angela to the dance? And he's like, oh, I really want to, but I hear she's really into this Eric guy.
Oh my god. Whose love life has not been tampered with by the Cullens?
That's
like,
a good
whose
point,
love
actually.
life hasn't been tampered with by the Cullens?
That's a really good point. That's a really
the
good
werewolves.
point.
The werewolves are the only people whose love lives.
That's
haven't been
actually
tampered
quite
with.
interesting because they all well, we'll get onto the problematic relationships of the dynamics between the walls, but yeah, no, it is. But anyway, yeah, so like Angela's the only one with anything, and he's like, oh, like I really like Angela, she's really great. Obviously you can't hear Bella's thoughts, but he's constantly like, as he's like talking to her, trying to like understand her and like rationalize like why she does the things she does, because she's so incomprehensible, she doesn't act like anybody's ever met. And there's like the point where he's like talking to her about like why she came to Forks. He's like, oh my god, I finally understood her. She was completely selfless. And it's like, what?
Yeah, what the hell are you talking about?
You misunderstood something here, Edward. Like, okay.
There's nothing more fun about a friend who acts like they don't like you, doesn't want to go anywhere with you. And, you know, it's like when they went to, like, La Push, and it's like, I don't think for the first movie she shows 1 ounce of sort of enthusiasm about hanging out with her friends or being around her friends.
She's even nicer in the films than in the books.
Yeah,
in the books,
yeah,
she's,
no,
like,
I bet.
genuinely, like, miserable all the time. And it, like, refuses to speak to anyone or, like, engage with them in any kind of conversation.
It's so integrated into, like, emo culture.
Yeah, thinks horrible things about most of her friends. Like, she's really horrible to Jessica, who's, like, one of the people who's, like, regularly nice to her.
Yeah.
And, like...
And even if Jessica is thinking horrible things about Bella, the thing is about thoughts, Edward, is that they mostly stay inside human beings' head, and you can choose to not say them if you don't want to.
Yeah.
So just because somebody's having bad thoughts about someone doesn't mean that they're a bad person.
And also, Jessica's thoughts, like, aren't really that bad. Like, she's like...
Love movie Jessica, by the way. Love movie Jessica. God. That one scene where they're, like, walking down the street, wherever, and she's like, I get you're depressed, or, like... When
they make her valedictorian, I was like, that is Jessica's... That is Jessica.
I hope
not
she
valedictorian in the book.
She goes on to a good college.
Because Stephenie Meyer really hates Jessica, and it's like... literally, why? Like, the film really gets her in a way that Stephenie Meyer just doesn't. But anyway, yeah. So, like, she's an introverted loner, she's really mean to all of her friends. And if Edward really wanted someone selfish, he should have gone for Angela.
Yeah.
Is what we're saying. He should have
gone for Angela.
He should have said, no, Eric, I'm taking Angela.
Just because Angela is bookish and probably normal looking and not a... Yeah.
Okay, be curious. Bella is very curious, loving, headstrong, sometimes sarcastic. Okay, this is a lot of information all of a sudden. Persistent with meaningful things, not materialistic items. She's
very materialistic, I think.
There's like literally a point in Eclipse where what's her face? Victoria, but Riley, you know, her minion, has stolen her shirt, and she's like, I can't go to Alice's graduation party because I have, like, I've lost this one top, and that's what I wanted to wear, and I have nothing else to wear, so I can't go. Like, and she's constantly talking about
that old breakdown.
She's constantly talking about the Cullens' house, how amazing their house is. They have, like, loads of cars. She's constantly amazed by all their cars and, like, their flashy clothes and everything. Like, stop saying she's not materialistic, guys. Yeah. Stop saying she doesn't care about it. She does. She does care about it. It's fine. As someone who is very materialistic, it's fine. But just stop lying to me.
Materialism. Yeah. Let Bella consume.
We're living in a material world,
and only
guys.
Scared of things that she thinks will hurt her loved one's family. I feel like she was pretty scared of James when he was attacking her.
Yeah, so people who are
her loved one's family, but it doesn't sort of include herself.
Well,
because like she's constantly the idea is that she's constantly putting herself in harm's way because she is the what was it in like the legend, like the third wife or some shit like that.
Yeah, which to be fair, she actually does. Like she does consistently. Like she thinks about Charlie a lot. And she actively runs towards danger in an effort to keep the superhuman beings out of danger. Just like, so like, it's just, but to that extent,
do that. She does, yeah.
But to that extent, it's just stupid. You know? It's just annoying because it's like these people are like literally superhuman with like hundreds of years of experience. Yeah. Like, what do you think is going to happen to? Anyway, so yes, she is curious. She is materialistic, and she is very selfless when it comes to protecting her friends, but also in a really stupid way, I think is what we've got out of that. Work hard in school.
This is the daily actions part. So this is just what you have to think about on the daily to be
number one you should be thinking about is work hard in school. She's an excellent student because she works very hard. She was in AP classes. She was in AP Science. I don't really know what AP is.
It says study hard, but then it also just says on the bottom, there's a bullet point that says Bella tries her best at school. She doesn't do very well, though she also enjoys reading school books and doesn't have other interests. So what is it? So what's the actual crack? Does she do well in the books?
Well, it's like, this is the thing, is like, it's very interesting in terms of like, is Bella a reliable narrator? She doesn't see herself as beautiful, but we know she is. People see things in her, and Stephenie Meyer wants us to see things in her that like just aren't there, like she and like that she consistently like disregards, like, again, like she's so materialistic. So like it's difficult to say because she's always like, oh, like I'm an average student, blah blah blah. She's obviously in like what we would call in England like the top sets.
Yeah.
Like I don't really know what AP class
No,
is,
neither do
but
I.
like I think people just say it in like Veronica Mars. And like she doesn't see, like she like clearly like reads a lot for like fun. She doesn't really like watch TV. She like likes to read the classics.
But I think that impulse is so interesting because it's like very similar to like After, where like a character has to not constantly, at least one time quote a classic to, you know, really couch the book itself as in amongst like literature. You know what I mean? Like that monologue at the beginning about, what is it that I think it's in the movies. Again, I don't know if it's in the books. The one about ice that she does.
Oh yeah.
Who is it? It's
some
like
say the world will end in fire.
Yeah.
Some say
Who is it? That's Robert.
What I've tasted of desire. A hold of those who favour fire. I've watched the movie too many times.
Yeah.
I will actually find. I thought we'll actually find it.
Yeah. But I think that the inclusion of
From Fire and Ice by Robert Frost.
I knew it was by Robert Frost. I knew it was Frost. I did nearly say I thought it was Robert Frost, but yeah, like I feel like the inclusion of like quotes from literature or making your main character, your female lead, like a book buff is so common. Like to be like,
It's
I
so
know, I'm
common.
like it's like the same in fucking 50 Shades of Grey, which obviously is a Twilight fan fiction, so it leads, that's why, and they kind of like really hammer home the fact that this is a storybook romance, which is why I think, or like this is the sort of romance that could be written about as, you know, in a sort of classical formula or a classical, or follows like a mythic formula.
I think it does include the quote from the book. I'm gonna go. I've got it over here somewhere. I'm gonna go find it and have a look. Blah blah blah. There's the Yeah, well, it starts from okay. So is another inclusion that we will probably get onto. It starts with a quote from the Bible, Genesis 2:17, which I'll get back to later. But I thought it started with an actual thing. Yeah, no, you're right. It is really common. Like, it's really common in. It's always something that like Cassandra Clare does a lot in her books.
Yeah,
like, she starts every chapter with a quote from some like famous work of poetry or whatever. I think it's actually really interesting. I think a lot of people have taken it as being very performative. But I think the way that Stephenie Meyer like clearly understands literature, whether or not you think she can, or not you think she can write well and you like the Twilight books or whatever, I think like the way that she includes the books in the novel is actually very smart.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this earlier because I was reading the Twilight Wiki, and like someone said that because, like, you know, in Eclipse when she's talking a lot about Wuthering Heights, and there's kind of like Bella describes herself as kind of Cathy to Edward's Heathcliff / Jacob's Edward Linton, and someone was like, oh well, I don't agree that the characters are alike, and it's like, well no, the characters don't have to be literally alike. But it was like, it's interesting the way that, you know, she's kind of self-aware of the sort of obsessive love that Edward and Bella share, and the way that she probably knows that, like, Jacob, you know, for those of you on Team Jacob, probably is like the more sensible, rational choice for Bella, but like, you know, for better or for worse, Bella will always choose Edward.
It's also, you know, about the choice between, like, I would say a domestic, you know, the nuclear domestic unit that one could achieve with Jacob, which you know, yes, he is part of a werewolf pack, which is already non-normative, but like speaking in kind of like getting with Edward and becoming a vampire makes you, well, we say would have made her barren, but she didn't intend to get pregnant. So, but I do think it is interesting, the idea that like marrying Edward means that she's going to, you know, it's going to be so far removed from any sort of potential family unit or normative sort of like even heterosexual experience that could be achieved with Jacob.
Yeah, and I think that's also true in the sense that, like, you know, if we think about the allusions to Wuthering Heights, she literally has to die to be with Edward. Like, she literally has to. And so I think I think that, you know, I mean, this started as like a conversation.
Yeah,
whether she's good in school or not.
Yeah.
The answer is we don't know. She's probably good enough to like get into Dartmouth, is what I remember. But what we've come away with essentially is that Stephenie Meyer understands literature.
Yep.
Okay. And that's how discussions work.
Is that her cleaning a piece of bread? Oh my god. I thought that was her cleaning a baguette.
I mean, what do you think that is?
A potato?
Listeners, like, we're currently on part 2, Daily Actions, Be Helpful Around the House, and it's a picture of
her washing a Subway sandwich.
Yeah, it looks like a pita bread.
It does.
Like a naan bread or something. Bella helps Charlie around the house and always offers to help. If you think this is written in 2 different
help if you think one needs it. A vampire said, I like to think there's a vampire writing this. Like, it's like this the Muppets count voice I keep doing, the
she does do that.
Speaking of family units, their family unit is so depressed. Like, it just reads to me as like this almost like genealogical like depression that she's like inherited from him, because he's barely capable of looking after himself by the looks of like, he's like very lonely, and then you see a lot of these things like reflected in her. Well, perhaps like she's better at kind of like doing the like domestic kind of like, well, even then we're told that she's pale and, you know, thin, so she's clearly taking care of Charlie but not taking care of herself. So just the idea of like the Swan household is this just kind of like strange space where 2 extremely depressed people like are inhabiting. It's just like, and then a vampire keeps breaking in and like, staring at everyone.
Yeah. Energy vampire.
Yeah. Edward's vibes are draining Charlie.
No, it is interesting, because it's like, it's made out that like, oh, she's used to helping out with her mother because obviously her mother's like, again, one of these superlatives that doesn't seem plausible to me is like that her mother is so erratic in her brain that she couldn't possibly take care of a household.
Yeah.
Which I just don't believe, because like, what did she do until Bella was like able to like read competently and stuff? Like, of course she's okay. Which is kind of one of those things which like makes me think that like Bella is probably overreacting in those situations where she's like,
is Twilight telling us that if your mother isn't a homemaker and your father isn't a good paternal figure, your darling child might go off and wed a vampire? Do
you know what? I don't think that's far from the truth. I don't think it's far from the truth. And I'll get on to like the way that the Cullen family unit is just like of like the perfect ideal for like suburban escapism later, but like,
I can believe that, like, without even you having to argue.
She does really judge her parents' lifestyle. She's like, oh, like Charlie just eats in the diner every night and then watches the football with his beer, and like, I have to.
At least he's kind of trying to have fun, Bella.
And it's kind of like presented in this way where it's like, oh, she can't have any like hobbies or anything like that because she's too busy taking care of her parents. But in reality, I think she's just boring. Like, I don't think she has anything else to do. But yeah, so be helpful around the house, guys. Read classics or books.
Try reading Wuthering Heights or Anne of Green Gables.
Jane Austen, Shakespeare, Chaucer. I don't really remember when she ever read Chaucer.
Yeah, since when is she cracking out The Wife of Bath?
Yeah, I don't remember reading Chaucer, but to be fair, I would absolutely love Bella's opinion on Chaucer.
Same.
Number 4, bite your lower lip a lot. That's just that's all the advice. We've already been over the way she interacts with others.
Be a doormat.
Bella is always soft, gentle, reticent, peaceful, and diffident unless someone is mean to her or loved ones.
She also stares a lot.
Oh god, this advice. I mean, yeah, she's a bit... you can't be a doormat. And what's the first piece of advice, guys? Have confidence in your desires. I think what we've come to is that Bella's a bit of a contradiction. And I think I've settled on the fact that I don't believe her as a reliable narrator.
No. No.
So, leaving WikiHow behind, because we could probably do a whole episode.
Yeah, and it's 35 minutes that we've been on the WikiHow.
But we've done a good introduction to some of the things we think about Bella, and since she is the main focus of most of the books,
and we've done her relationships as well.
Yeah. So, let's just briefly touch on Edward. That's a counterpoint. Before we move on to, like, the weird dynamics and, like, the relationships, like, within the stories.
Seeing as you read Midnight Sun, what would you say are the, like, being in his head, what are his main traits?
Incredibly self-indulgent.
Okay.
Arrogant.
Does
like,
he...
a massive overthinker.
Okay. Does he feel like a Victorian man? Does it feel like you're in the mind of a Victorian...
I feel like I'm in the mind of, like... You know, like, the kind of trope of, like, the old man who, like, just completely disregards, like, youths.
Yes.
Having, like, you know, like, it wasn't like this in my day. Like, that's literally what he's like. Like, he has this really... Like, first of all, like, if you haven't read it, listeners, the book is about 3 times as long as the original Twilight, and that's literally not a joke, because he doesn't sleep. And also, like, the implication is that he thinks really quickly, so, like, every conversation that he'll say something and then overthink that, and then, like, the person will reply, and then he'll, like, overthink that, and so it just takes so much longer to get anything done. So it is very self-indulgent to read. He's like, and, like, he has to say, it's so grim. Like, he's like, kids today, like, they're all like, he's like, oh god, all the like plebs in my school. He doesn't actually call them plebs, but like essentially, like, he thinks they're all stupid. He thinks they're all like wasting their lives.
Thank God that Bella got with him at this point, because I feel like there's a real potential for, like, Edward to, if what you're saying is true, and I totally believe it is, for him to be some sort of vampiric terrorist, to be like, fuck humankind. These technologies, apart from my silver Volvo, suck, and we're going in the wrong direction. I'm gonna bite everyone.
No, he really is. It's a weird, like, conflict, because he obviously, like, hates himself. He constantly refers to himself as a monster, which we already know from, like, the original Twilight Saga.
Yeah.
But then he clearly thinks he's so superior to, like, anything anyone else is doing who is, like, human. Like, he's not... This is what I think is really interesting, like, the dynamic between him and Rosalie, because Rosalie... you know, is constantly described as being really selfish. I think I sent Jamie, because I was reading Midnight Sun, and, like, on the first page he describes Rosalie's mind as a stagnant pool. And it's like, this is someone who he supposedly, like, cares about.
Yeah, this is his sister.
Yeah, quote unquote, yeah. He's like, so, like, it's, the way that he, like, rationalises his monstrosity is, like, he still thinks that he's, like, better than the people his age who are human. Like, he doesn't envy them until he meets Bella and, like, wants to be human so that he can be with her or whatever. But that's literally the only reason that he envies humanity, despite the fact that he completely hates himself. Whereas Rosalie, like, just desperately wants to be human and does, like, actually envy the people, which I feel like is a more, like, reasonable and, like, also, like, sympathetic, yeah. Like, I'm, like, understanding it. Stephenie Meyer really hates her. Doesn't want to like her at all. Yeah, like, I think that it's interesting, like, trying to understand the way that she wants us to understand Edward, because he's clearly meant to be this, like, well, I mean, you know, she compares him to Heathcliff. Obviously, it's not a, like, direct comparison, but, like, this kind of very, like, iconic, like, trad romantic figure, you know, the Mr. Darcy coming out of the lake.
Defanged by the love of a very pale, thin girl.
Yeah, essentially, like, it's like, how do you, like, take the sex appeal out of these really famous characters, and essentially it's to make him immortal and like really depressed about it. And the reason I say sex appeal is because this has like been something that literary critics in like the recent criticism have picked up on a lot, is like the fact that it's on the surface, I don't think it is, on the surface like very, very asexual. Like there's no kind of like, for a vampire novel, when you think the vampire is meant to like often represents, you know, the bloodlust kind of represents like sexual lust and this like kind of unquenchable desire, like for something that has like this heritage of like being really super like hypersexed like connotations, it's very not sexy. Like they don't have sex, they barely touch without him kind of having a breakdown about it and being, oh my god, I could have killed you. And they don't kiss often. It feels like, it does feel like a very kind of like you're saying, like kind of Victorian Edwardian
attitudes,
classic courtship of like, you know, they do have one discussion about sex, which is they're like well actually they have two, and one of them's really awkward, is that the first one takes place in Twilight, and it's the longest and most boring scene out of all the books, which is when she has seen him, like they go out and they're in the meadow and she sees him like sparkly, they go back and then he's like, oh, I don't actually have to ever leave you because like why would I'm always awake, I'm a vampire, blah, blah, blah. I can just stay in your room forever.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh okay, but like I can't sleep now because like I'm really agitated by the fact that I know you're like gonna be watching me. And he's like, oh well, what would you rather be doing then? And then there's like a kind of like extended pause where it's kind of like sex, and then she's like, I just want to find out more about you. it's like
what would you, it's like dot ellipsis.
yeah. And they're both really awkward about it, and then the next time is basically like when he's like, no, not until we're wed, which is uncommon for most, especially like teen vampire fiction, but like just vampire fiction in general. It really removes the sex from it. And he's kind of like this very like asexual, repressed character, and I have my theories about why that is. I think he's gay.
I love that. I can get behind that.
I think he's an absolute queer icon. And again, this is another thing that people are like, oh no, it's really like heteronormative for a vampire novel. And my response to that is like, it's about a sparkly 17-year-old boy who's hiding his true nature at the behest of 3 fabulously dressed Italian men. Like, it's so gay. What are you talking about?
who want to take him in and like usher him under their wing, essentially.
Who want him to be a part of their coven. Like family. Like, it's very gay. It's very gay, and I think it's also like very sexy. Like people have pointed out as well, that it could like it's potentially like not a particularly feminist like book, or doesn't present a very feminist philosophy in terms of the fact that, you know, and under the guise of like Edward having to be in control all the time, he is in control all the time. That doesn't really have a say in anything, and is kind of like has to do what he tells her essentially. But I think that's quite kinky. I think that's very kinky.
I think it is,
and I think that it's kinky because like I think the reason it's kinky, and I think the reason it works as a representation of kink, where for example like 50 Shades of Grey maybe falls down slightly, is that like the fact that they never show the sex, like the fact that like the boundaries can never be broken down because they're not actually having the sex that they're like recreating the fantasy.
I mean, the sex part of sexuality doesn't just start when the clothes come off. Like, and I think it's very unimaginative to think in those ways, because like you said, like Twilight is filled with not just yearning and longing, but I would say sexually charged moments like that.
Sexually charged moments like that, and also like a constant undercurrent of like sexual economy that Bella really refuses to engage in. Like, if you think of like when she like first comes to the school and she's like, you know, all these boys are like trying to ask me out, but she keeps getting asked out by all these boys. and she doesn't want any of them.
No.
All these teenage boys who are her own age, who kind of, like, want to see her as, like, a woman in a woman's body, and kind of want to have a bit.
Have a try.
And she really, really rejects that, and she like, the kind of, like, puberty and kind of, like, growing up into this, like, inhabiting this, like, female body is really, really problematic for her. And, like, her anxiety around aging is, like, obviously really prevalent throughout the whole thing, but the way it, like, manifests in, like, her body and how she doesn't want, like, when it's her birthday and new moon, she doesn't want to be a year older than Edward, even though Edward's, like, 109.
Yeah.
It's like, but she's like, physically, I am a year older than you, and, like, the way that manifests into her body as something that's uncomfortable for her, owning this, like, woman's body that she really wants to reject, in favour of, essentially, what she thinks turns out to be wrong, but a sterile, dead Peter Pan figure who can never grow up. It's really interesting in terms of, like, that kind of sexuality, because, like I say, like, she's trying to disengage from it.
I do think as well, like, especially you saying, like, 17, and I do think, obviously, because, like, Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart do not look 17. If you actually think about the because, like you said, like, the movie just has such a sort of, like is diffused so much into the imaginative consciousness of these characters. Like, if I were to read Twilight, the book again, I would be imagining Robert Pattinson as Edward, and no amount, I feel like, of imaginative sort of, like, upheaval could ever cast him as somebody else in my mind. God forbid, like, somebody that looks like a 17-year-old as well, considering all of the things that actually happen. But also, it's like, how do they get past customs? Are people not like, where the hell are your parents?
Well, they get,
you know what I mean?
They get
like,
Jay Janks, my favourite character who's never talked
they
about.
They do get Jay Janks, but, like, are they not, like, I'm just imagining, like, the airport security just being like, these two, because, you know, like, actual 17-year-olds look like kids. They're like children.
Yeah, Carlisle must, like, look like an absolute trafficker.
He must do, yeah. Charlie just walking past, just being like, this is fine by me. I got cobbler to eat. I can't be dealing with
my little girl. This 84-year-old woman. Yeah, no, it's like, but, like, yeah, I think it's interesting, like, thinking about it in terms of, like, the sexuality of bodies in this way, how they don't age, how, like, aging is actively a threat, how being of age seems to be, like, something kind of, like, dangerous for Bella.
In terms of, so would you, if we were to rank sort of, like, the things that puts Bella in danger, there'd be Victoria, the Volturi, the ceaseless march of time.
The ceaseless march of time, yeah. Well, it's interesting, she wants eternity, she just doesn't want to...
look like shit.
Yeah, she's really, again, very, like,
I get
about
that.
her looks, very concerned about her looks.
Yeah.
I'm not, like...
Yeah.
It goes deeper than just, like, her being, like... I'm, like, you know, you might think I'm saying that she's shallow, but I think it goes deeper than that. I think it goes into, like, her worry about, like, again, like, this looking older.
I think it's a form of materialism. I think it's an objectification of the body.
Inhabiting a male... inhabiting a male body, inhabiting a woman's body, that is something which is seen, you know, by her peers, by her male peers especially, and even her female peers, like Jessica. And there's another character who I always forget, whose name I believe is Laura, because she's not in the films, who absolutely loathes Bella, and it's so funny. But, like, she's constantly, like, you know, running into bumps with, like, these two girls because they're like, oh my god, she's gonna steal all our men. Like, she's so hot, she's gonna steal our... blah, blah, blah. All the men, like, want her, and she instead, she, like, obviously she doesn't want it. She was completely disengaged and engaged in this, like, life of, like, eternal chaste monogamy, essentially, with a man who she believes can't have children. And, like, will prevent her from ever having to, like, reconcile with being an actual woman. And yet, in this relationship, she's still, like, still acting out this really kinky fantasy of, like, that's very kind of BDSM. And I say that knowing a lot of people will be like, this is an example of a BDSM relationship. But it includes a lot of the language that is, and a lot of the kind of, like... rhetoric and, like, allusions to this kind of, like, I don't want to say a subdom dynamic, but, you know, this kind of power imbalance.
Yeah.
That is very, like, what's the word? Like, invested in this kind of very kinky world.
Yeah.
Like, it really is. If we read it in that way, then it becomes, like, quite a very different story in terms of the way we understand Bella and the way we understand, like, women in the story, because, like, if we think of Edward as being, like, because he's a vampire, obviously, like, he is literally, like, these books are fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't, like, so, like, for Bella, Edward literally is this kind of perfect fantasy where they're engaging in this quite kinky dynamic. That's what she's really into, and people can read it as being problematic, but I don't think it is, because, like I say, like, they don't have sex, they never have an opportunity for these boundaries to be broken down, and at every point Bella's like, I really like this is the relationship that I want, blah blah blah.
I do think as well, like, the part of that as well is also, especially in him, like you said, Edward being the perfect man, I do think, like, the two, like you've written on the plan, two of the most important things, things that are out of her control, that are just, like, I suppose, facets of her being, is the fact that her blood smells good to him and he is incapable of reading her thoughts. And those two things that she doesn't, it's not like having a bad personality or, having to even do, like, a hobby, or because she doesn't have any hobbies. So, like, she having these two things that are reliable staples, like, of her being. There's no way that this man can kind of fall out of love with her because these two things will always be there. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
He'll never be able to read her. Well, I don't know about when she becomes a vampire. Does he comment on her blood when she becomes a vampire? Is it still? No,
it's like, it's not what I mean of it. Like, I mean, it's never really specified as to, like, what happens with that. Yeah, what happens with that, which I think is really, I'm really interested in vampire physiognomy. I will get onto that in a second. But yeah, no, like obviously she's just like, that's the interesting thing then, is because, like, it's when she's made a vampire, which is also coincides just about with when they have sex for the first time.
Yeah.
After they get married, and that is the point at which they're kind of, like, Bella is able to take a more active role in, like, their future. She engineers a lot of these plans, like, around, like, what are they going to do about the Volturi, like, on her own without him. She steps into this role, like, as his equal after, like, they have sex, and it's like, I mean, you've seen the films and how ridiculous that present representation. The sparkles! It sparkles when she orgasms.
Yeah.
But that is, like, I think a fairly, like, good representation of a teenage girl who is, and I know, I am aware that this slightly contradicts my earlier point about her trying to disengage with the sexual economy, but I think you can read it as a good representation of a teenage girl safely coming to realise her sexual fantasies, and that in turn kind of being the thing that, makes her realise herself, like, as a woman.
I think I do really agree with that. I do think the moment when sex actually happens is really, really interesting. Especially, I'm most referring to the movie, because I feel like that sequence, from the moment they have sex, the first time they have sex, and, she becomes immediately pregnant, the pregnancy feels like, what is pregnancy but not sex enduring? In a way. Like, because as well, what follows is this kind of, like you said, like, these vampiric moments where she's drinking blood for her child, or for her fetus or whatever, and then the pregnancy ends in this, like, not just, I would, not like a normal, and quote-unquote normal birthing death, but, like, this extremely, and then the act of the bite, which is also a sexual act. So that entire bit is where I think it becomes supercharged with like the actual. So if it's kind of like sex is sort of like an undercurrent throughout most of it, it really sort of, like, breaches in that kind of, like, last section of the film.
it's interesting because, like, that like, I mean, the films and the books as well, the Breaking Dawn as a thing is that I generally don't like it, and I try and reread it as little as I possibly can, because
it's boring.
No, it's not just that it's boring, but it's also like completely grotesque. Like it's really uncomfortable to read. Like it's because it's obviously
Breaking Dawn Part 1. Is this the one where she's
the book itself.
the book's all in one.
But the film, I don't like watching the first film either.
It's not good
because it's really horrible, because obviously like in the book, like there's the entire middle section, which is the part where Bella's found that she's pregnant, she's determined to have this child, she gives birth to the child, she gets really ill, she nearly dies, she's turned into a vampire. Is all told from Jacob's perspective, and
I completely forgot about that.
It's completely, like, the way he describes her body is so horrific and uncomfortable, and like he describes how, like, she's completely, like, this emaciated form, with this, like, grotesque, distended belly, which is, like, bruised, like, black and purple, like, entirely because, like, the child has been, like, kicking so hard, and, she can't stand, she can't walk, she's basically like a living skeleton until she gives birth, and, obviously that's depicted in the film, and it's really uncomfortable to watch, but to read it is just awful. Like, it's horrific. There's a part in the book where, like, Rosalie, like, they have to, like, tear the child out of her, and, like, Rosalie has to literally, like, bite through her to, like, get in. It's really horrible. And I say this as someone who really, really loves gore in gothic fiction. Like, I'm very much into the male gothic. But this is, like, actual horror of it is, like, awful, because it's this thing where it's not even kind of, like, it's not even, like, a kind of comical kind of take on, like, this kind of hammer horror kind of take on violence. Like, it's so visceral, and it's so connected to her as a woman, as, like, a woman who is, like, I was going to say doing the duty of a woman. Obviously, the duty of a woman is not to give birth, but in this thing that I like, like, generally only the female body experiences, and in this incredibly violent way, in this way that has to happen, I think, in Stephenie Meyer's mind, in order to purge her to be ready to receive this gift of vampirism. Yeah. And it's the same with all of the women. Yeah. All of the female vampires have these terrible backstories. Yeah. Of, like, violence. Like Rosalie is, like, trigger warning. Rosalie is, like, brutally gang raped and then left for dead. Esme is, like, I probably should have done, I'll put a trigger warning at the beginning of this podcast, because it's really horrible. Like, Esme, like, jumps off a cliff after she miscarries, or her child dies. All these things that are very related to her being a woman. Alice, like, is so traumatized by her past life, she can't even remember it. Yeah. It's like... and it's like... For Edward, it's just like, he got the flu.
He got the flu and it went kind of bad. Yeah. Jasper was a racist. And what did Emmett do?
Emmett got mauled by a bear.
Oh, well, okay, maybe Emmett can be invited into the feminine.
But, like, it's not this kind of, like, horrific, like... No, it's not. Horrific trauma. It's just, like, he got kind of bitten by a bear. Like,
oh, boo-hoo! Boo-hoo, Emmett!
But there's horrific gender trauma that all of these female vampires have experienced in order to reach this point. And it doesn't even stop at the Cullen family. Like, I can't really remember them, but the backstories of the vampires who we meet, who come to bear witness at the end of Breaking Dawn, all of them also have terrible backstories. Yeah. Like, in very stark contrast to the men, who are kind of, like, generally okay.
Well, it's like that Bree... What's that, like, the Bree Tanner?
Bree Tanner, yeah.
Like, I can't even really remember with her, but, like, we get a whole book, essentially, just detailing how tragic and terrible, like, being in that, like, newborn cult, essentially, is, until she gets her, like, head torn off by Arrow.
Yeah, it's like, it's very strange, like, how Stephenie Meyer really feels the need to really punish the women in her books, and doesn't even stop at them being vampires. It's like, Rosalie is consistently punished throughout the books because she's ungrateful for being a vampire. So it's like her punishment kind of continues into the afterlife, even though she's quote unquote received this amazing gift.
Yeah,
like, she's like she really doesn't want us to like. It's just very strange how that is like that whole process of like Bella giving birth is like this. It feels very like kind of like. Yeah, like a cult initiation ceremony, basically, into this very heteronormative Jesus cult, which is essentially what the Cullen family is.
It is. You have your Carlisle as a Jesus figure theory, which is bloody beautiful viewers. So
yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it's a million like. I don't think it's.
Oh, it doesn't have to be watertight.
No. I think it's. I don't think it's something difficult to grasp.
Oh no,
like,
for sure.
Carlisle is like presented as being like the way that they describe him. My God, like Edward's constantly like he is the best of us, and he's like this amazing compassion and control, and like he saved us, and blah blah blah.
Vampire Messiah would be a sick metal band.
They would actually. I like that. Like the way that they talk about him as this kind of like, ultimate patriarch of this vampire family that's constantly like trying to atone for their sins and are like literally hating the state as vampires. You know, they don't drink human blood and they think that their nature is awful. And I mean, Carlisle has one of the more interesting backstories, which we hear very little about. But
which is it?
He's like, so he is born during. He's not exactly sure which year, but he's born during the. What's it called? What was that? What? You know, after the Civil War, where we had the interregnum, is that what it's called? Between two kings, the period where we had Oliver Cromwell.
Yes.
After the Civil War, the Protestant Parliament. The Roundheads and whatever took over and like deleted Christmas or whatever. I can't remember. It's not a period of history I know really well. But so he was born around then, and he is. First of all, it's important to say that he's extremely young. I think we have again this idea, like from the films, that he's kind of like a presentation of his own. He's only 23
in the books.
Yeah. He's 23. So again, like this obsession with like youth. But anyway, yeah. So he is born into this Protestant family, which is like they're not even Puritan family. I don't know.
It's Protestant, I believe.
They are Protestant, but I think they're like the more extreme.
Oh, okay.
ones.
Like No.
I think they are Puritans, and then afterwards they went over to America and did the whole Salem thing.
I see.
But yeah, this like puritanical family, and his dad was a preacher, and his dad like believed in the existence of vampires and would like take like a group of men like on these vampire hunts, and Carlisle went on one of these hunts and they were seeking out this coven in a London sewer, which in the 17th century England must have been disgusting. And they fight, and he kills Carlisle and turns him into a vampire. And Carlisle has, as far as I'm aware, never tasted human blood, because he, upon waking up, realising that he's a vampire, he's like, oh my God, like he also has like one of like, it describes like one of the longer like processes of like turning into a vampire, because it's like he only got like bit like a tiny bit, so there wasn't much in him, so it took him a long time to like change.
So I love also just the I suppose, like, I don't know what's the word for it, like the infecting process of that. So no matter how much, so you can get like a drop of vampire venom in your body, and you definitely will turn into a vampire. It might just take like months.
I think so.
Like a drop. So there's no way that, like, so if you even get like a teeny tiny bit, you will become a vampire. There's no way that you could get a little bit and it might just like pass out in.
I think so.
Like,
yeah.
Halloween,
I think so. I mean, that's the implication.
Okay.
I believe.
Okay. I think that is the implication.
Yeah. So. I mean, I think the other implication is that, like, the vampires in this are, like, so thirsty for blood that, again, like, another reason where at the end, like, there's only kind of two half vampire, half humans, is that the idea is that a vampire could never would struggle so much to consummate a relationship with a human because of the bloodlust that they like would just kill them.
Right. That's testament to our Bella and Edward.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I will get on. That's what I'm getting to. And so he like wanders off into the wilderness in this kind of like 40 days and 40 nights illusion.
Okay.
In which he, you know, it tries to repeatedly kill himself. Obviously, can't kill himself, and then kind of, you know, so hungry, ends up killing a deer, realises he can live off that. And that's how he
like
becomes... It keeps you strong. And so that's how he survives. So he's never drank human blood. Obviously has this, you know, amazing ability to, like, control his bloodlust. You know, works as a doctor, which I was thinking about your theory that you told me. Remember, like last year, you like, I really like the idea that Carlisle Cullen is like really into like really old medicine. Just like has an update.
His apothecary in the back. He's like a totally nice, normal guy. And he dresses like a modern doctor, but like Bella comes in with her like scratch, and he's just like, the leeches will take care of this.
Yeah. Well, the stars say.
Yeah. Him and his lovely soft, sort of deep voice. Your humours are underlined. We must get a pint of blood out you. Come on.
Like, I love that idea. Because, like, doctors are like, regularly fired.
Yeah.
Like, at like 60 or whatever, because they're like not up to date with, like,
they're not up to date.
How is Carlisle retraining? I wanted the practicalities of this. But yeah, so he's like obviously like, you know, this healer with this amazing sense of control, who like has cultivated this kind of family of essentially disciples who are like following his way of life. He's like a martyr to this cause because like it's like, as far as we know, like only 2 covens that we ever hear of in the books that like live this way, and like most vampires do drink like human blood. And it is this patriarch just like consistently like moves his family around to like and like puts them through this trial of like, you have to do high school again.
Yeah.
So he can stay here longer. Like,
yeah, what if he has people that like, if he sort of adopts someone into the family and they're like, I don't want to go back to school, how does he gently persuade them?
Well, this is the
how
thing.
How does he program them?
Well, this is the thing, is that they kind of, the reason they explain it is that they're like, oh, well, because like Rosalie's always like, I hate going to school.
Yeah.
And it's like, the reasoning is like, if they pretend to be younger, then they can stay for longer.
Right. No, I'm with you.
So like, the younger they pretend to be, obviously then they have to go to school every day, which like, when you think about it in those terms, is like fair about it, but it's so weird.
Yeah.
Like the concept of like this immortal family who's like going to high school.
But like, I think that's interesting as well, because like realistically, I suppose it's a decision to live amongst humans. Like they could probably, you know, they don't have to breed, they could just live underwater if they wanted to and eat. Oh my god, new book. Cullens move underwater, live off of sea creatures.
Oh my god, Atlantis!
Copyright here, you can't take our idea.
Cullens in Atlantis.
This may give us rights. We will do things with the Twilight series you couldn't even imagine. But yeah, this decision I think is really interesting to me, that like decision to, like, you know, going to school, to be like, oh yeah, we don't have to, that way we don't have to move around. But that decision,
to play this facade of like this nuclear family.
The decision is to be near humans. They want to live amongst humans, live around humans, but never ever eat them. And Carlisle is aware that,
or
like,
even the interesting thing is like, never ever eat them, fine, but also not engage with them. Like the Cullens are like outsiders in the school. Yeah. And also like Charlie hints at like they're outsiders as well, like in the community. Yeah. And people like don't really trust them because like they get sense about
there's something spooky about that brutalist house that they live in.
Oh my god, that house!
Isn't Charlie just like, yeah, Carlisle's like great?
Yeah, Charlie loves
great.
Him. Charlie loves him.
He does love him, but I think I do think like it's like, oh yeah, he's a doctor and all the rest of it. But yeah, every member is, and obviously the Clearwaters and the and like the black family are like, don't like them because they're fucking vampires. So I guess perhaps that's part of the like.
I mean, I wouldn't try. Like, it's a 23-year-old and his wife, who like are millionaires, like town, like very successful town doctor with teenage children who are all dating. Like, very weird. I completely appreciate people not finding them very comfortable.
I also think it's curious as well that Carlisle's go to school. You just go to school,
blend in,
knowing as well. Yeah, like being like like we said, making the decision to live amongst humans, not eating them, but also not engaging with the community. Also knowing that like Jasper's essentially like a rabid dog on like the red bear string, because when Bella cut her hand on a thing, like, and she bled everywhere, he like immediately went into the throes of blood loss.
I was thinking about this earlier. Like, Bella gets a paper cut and he loses it. In a school of 300 people, you're telling me that for the past 2 years, not a single
drop of blood has been spilled.
A paper cut.
Yeah.
Genuinely telling me this.
Me like biting my nail until it bleeds, like in like 30 meters across from school. I'm just like, I'm in danger.
Yeah,
you just hear like Jasper, like
in a school of like high school kids, who presumably have like sports teams, and like, you know,
and they're just fucking around.
Yeah, exactly.
Not one of them has spilled enough blood to sort of make Jasper like
fight in the car park.
Yeah,
these kids aren't safe. And like,
imagine if like that. I love the idea that like Twilight could have ended in the first like 20-25 minutes if the Bella, like he did not. So Edward does manage to stop the car. Oh, phew, thank God. But Bella grazes her knee and on the other side of just like runs at her and like grabs her by the head and pulls it off, and then credits roll.
That's actually interesting because it's weird like how close Bella consistently comes to death at the hands of Edward.
Yeah.
That she like never knows about.
Or his family
we only find out about in Midnight Sun.
Oh yeah, you said.
Because he's like, one of his excuses to his family is like, well, if any of her blood had been spilt on that pavement, I would not have been able to help back.
Yeah. I would have freaked out.
I genuinely would have eaten her there and then.
So don't worry. I was doing us a favour, actually.
Yeah, like, it's genuinely like
sociopathic.
And there's like a point, this is really relevant to Golan. There's a point like at which like when he's like deciding to take her to the meadow, and he's honestly unhinged at this point, and Alice is like describes it in the way of like, Bella like has to go to the meadow, like her future is described as like a load of strings that are all like knotted in this one ball, which is the meadow, and then they like go out afterwards, but like she has to like go through the meadow, like she has to go to the meadow, and 50% chance that she'll be fine, 50% chance that you'll kill her, but you both have to do this to find out.
But Alice, this isn't how this has worked for the last few books. I was like, no, this is how it works now.
Well, Alice's visions are another problem, which Stephenie Meyer does actually address in the preface.
Oh, does she?
Yeah, because she's like, because essentially like, you know how like in the first one it's kind of very much like, oh yeah, like she kind of gets glimpses of things sometimes, it's very vague and uncontrollable, and then like by book 3 she's like, I'm watching everyone's decisions. Like she's masterminding as far away as Italy, and it's just like
Alice's power grows.
Yeah, and Stephenie Meyer's like, I recognise that this is a plot point.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry. But anyway, yeah, back to the Carlisle family. Basically, it's a really pseudo-religious cult, and that's my only point. So what is the alternative to this? The Volturi. I love the Volturi. Can we please talk about
the Volturi?
The Volturi, and also like them as a representation of, because like it's very much like the conflict between them from Bella's perspective is very much stacked up as a kind of like trad good versus evil. Like, these people
they don't know what true love is. They're the real monsters. Not like my Edward.
Can I just say for the listeners, I love Arrow.
Yeah, I love Arrow too.
Oh god, honestly, we went round to our friend's house and we all had a group watch session.
Oh, it's great.
And we were watching it, and I was just, and like everyone was like, "Oh my god, the Volturi suck," and we were like, "No, get them!"
Yeah, we were like, "Do a Volturi defense squad." Like, absolutely not.
I love them. The reason I love them, and the reason I find them so interesting, is because obviously Stephenie Meyer like sees them as being the big bad villains of the books. But what they really are is like a bureaucratic, law-abiding body of like who have like made this rule: don't show yourself to the humans. And if you don't follow it, then that puts all of our ways of life in danger.
Vampires, their whole point is that vampires need legislation. Sure, they do eat a massive amount of people, and I don't understand, especially considering, like, again, in the films, we see that one, I think it's in New Moon, where, like, as Bella's leaving, there's, like, a tour party being taken, and then, it's like everyone's eaten. But they're vampires, it's what they have to do.
But also, like, I don't know, I'm really interested in the logistics of this. Like, how do you just disappear? Not just one tour party, but probably, like, multiple tour parties.
That's what I mean.
Like, how has this not made it into, like, the regular news?
The victims that they're taking is just from this one city, presumably in Italy, where loads of
tourists and stuff.
There you go.
Tourists, like in like Hawaiian
people
shirts,
disappearing in this one city in Italy. And I don't know about you, but I just wouldn't go to the city in Italy where tens of thousands of people are disappearing and never being seen again. I just wouldn't go there.
No one's talking about it.
From the human side of things, I just wouldn't go there. Because the Volturi aren't going to come to where we live and just start picking us off. They're very much like, no, this is where I stay and this is where I eat.
Yeah, I love that. And I really want to know more about how that works. Obviously, Stephenie Meyer like has this very tunnel vision on like Bella's like perspective, and so we very rarely like get an insight into any of the vampires' like actual existences. But I am so interested in like the logistics of being a vampire. Like how are you gonna get? Like, it's like, you know, in Vampire Diaries, where they just are constantly raiding a blood bank, but then it's like, someone must notice soon that there are just bags and bags of blood. As the vampire population grows,
someone's got to know.
Someone's gonna notice. I'm always really interested. But anyway, the Volturi, essentially benign, in my opinion. Yeah. Benign and fabulous.
I also think, as well, I like the Volturi, like, being like, you cannot show yourselves to humans, because I can't actually remember, I don't know whether I'm just, like, pulling this from my own just kind of theory, but I don't know whether they talk about sort of modern technologies in the movie. I feel like they kind of might do, but, like, don't quote me on that. But, like, the idea that, like, I think that there is a consciousness that the Volturi have of that human technologies have kind of gotten to the point that perhaps, you know, the vampires aren't this, like, all-powerful, like, undefeatable adversary for the human anymore because of, like, military technologies or such like that. So they're like, hey, we want to we want to continue existing. Don't fucking let humans know that we exist. If you want to keep this going.
They literally have one law.
One law. They're like, eat. So imagine if, honestly, I feel like it would be more frightening to be a vampire if Carlisle had that kind of like power, like the Volturi have, Carlisle's like, everyone needs to eat animals. Everyone eat veggies. Like, I feel like the Volturi are the most benevolent. They're like, yeah, you guys eat animals if you want. We might come and try and steal members of your family, Carlisle. But it's a pretty fucked up situation that you've got anyway.
But they're also like, they try and convince them, and they're kind of like, oh, we can't really do anything unless you do anything to break the rules. So it's just like, well, just don't break the one rule.
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone, guys. And yet, the reason I think they're really interesting is that they are presented as this kind of evil force in the books. And so I think, you know, it's my takeaway when I reread these for the first time since reading them, like, as a teenager, which was a few years ago now, was that, like, it's very it's very of that time period, that neoliberal, like, you know, in the run up to the Obama years, you know, that is it reeks like very of that, like self-indulgent, like not really concerned about like any bigger picture. But I think when you consider what the Volturi actually do, how the vampire political world is structured, it's really interesting to have this essentially like bureaucratic benign government which insists on, like, you know, kind of meddling in your life to a certain degree, as being the villain, as actually incredibly contemporary and, like, relevant to now, like, in terms of, like, you know, the state's not doing anything too bad theoretically, and yet there's like this constant, like, encroaching on, like, the way that you want to live your life, and, like, how that's seen as, like threatening thing to, like, your way of life. I think that's a very, like, modern thing. Yeah. And, like, a very, like, real concern in, 2022? That's what year it is. Like...
So I'm still in 2006.
Yeah. I never left. But yeah, I think that's a really cool idea, and I think that if I knew more about, like, political theory, I would probably write an essay on that. But I don't. So I'm encouraging any political theorists out there, please write a journal essay on this topic, please,
because we can't articulate it, so
exactly.
Please do it for us.
Well, I don't quite. I can't, I'm sure there's much more, like,
it's definitely it's a very rich
that I can't access because I don't necessarily, like, understand it. But I think it's a very interesting idea that the thing that's seen as dangerous isn't, for example, like, a Lord Voldemort. It's like this, like a government body that is essentially, like, by all accounts, is following the rules, but that is still, like, in that way, like, posing a threat to the citizens which live, like, under it.
What other vampires do you find interesting? Well, only because, as well, there is that, like, they're kind of forgettable, but it's those two guys that Carlisle doesn't invite.
The Romanians!
Yeah, the Romanian...
Dimitri and Vladimir.
Yeah, where's my phone? Because I can't remember what their incentive is. Dimitri... Hold on. So,
get it, because they are on Twilight Wiki, so get it up. But I think, essentially, it's that and this is the part that I love, because we get a hint of, again, like, this literary heritage of it, where, like, Stephenie Meyer, like, makes a reference essentially to Dracula, which is kind of like the Romanian coven in the 14th century, which is meant to be where Dracula's from, is in charge, is not the Volturi, it's this Romanian coven, and they are in charge, and the way that they lead, they say, is that they're like, you know, we were very open about the fact that we were vampires, we were going to kill everyone.
Yeah, that was it. When we ruled, everything came to us. Prey, diplomats, favour seekers, such was our power. But we never put on white hats and called ourselves saints. We were honest about what we were.
Yeah, like, and yeah, this is what I mean, is that, like, this is kind of a representation of kind of like a, I don't want to say a monarchy necessarily, but what's the word? Oh, I'm trying to remember my A-level history. When you have, it's like the idea of, like, a state being ruled by, like, one person or, like, one family. There's a really common word for it that's just not coming to my mind right now. I'm sure the listeners are probably, like, screaming.
Yeah.
Headphones. I'm probably like, yeah, that is what I'm thinking of. But, like, right now, my brain is just not accessing that word.
Diarchy? I don't think it is that. Autocracy?
Autocracy,
yeah,
that's the word I'm looking for.
That's it.
Like, the autocratic kind of feudal state of the Romanian coven, which is then overthrown by, this more, like, not democratic, but more like a modern governmental system of, like, you know, various hierarchies and, like, checks and balances, and kind of this kind of system which overthrows the Romanian coven for becoming complacent. Yeah. And is then, like, you know, which ethically, which is better? Yeah. The Romanian coven, because they kind of wanted people to be like, yeah, we're vampires. Run and hide, bitches.
Get out of here.
We will eat you. Because essentially that's the difference. Yeah. And I'm just I just think it's a really interesting topic.
And the Volturi didn't even kill the two remaining Romanian, like, coven members. They were just like, okay, we're in power now. You go and do whatever you want. Presumably, I don't know, like, sucking mad blood in Romania.
Yeah, I'm sure they're still alive.
But I feel like if I ran into them, like, if I ran into Edward, I probably would just think, like, I don't know, like, SoundCloud. I'm not a SoundCloud rapper. I don't know, I would just think sick boy. But if I run into Dimitri and Vladimir, I think, oh my god, that's a vampire. I'm gonna get out.
Vampires.
Those are vampires.
Oh my god, when they come in the film, and I was literally like cheering for them. Yeah, it's my favourite.
They are a vampire's vampire.
Because I love the literary heritage, the heritage that's like implied through it. Like I love the whole like I think I've kind of touched on it before, but like Stephenie Meyer just really is not interested in any of her characters, and like all of her characters are more interested than Bella, and we only ever see Bella. And he's like got this like tunnel vision, and you occasionally get glimpses into like the past, and it's like you're clearly so invested in this life, and she keeps rewriting Twilight, but it's like, why don't you write some of these backstories that are so fascinating? Better stories. But anyway, the Volturi, I think, are cool, and I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there for someone else who's more like politically minded to unpack.
So please do that.
Please someone do it. I would love to read an essay on that. So yeah, there's one thing that I'm coming up with here that I'm just kind of like skimming over my notes, but like we've sort of touched on before, but like the anatomy of vampires, which I think is very interesting here, and like the way that like what, because I said like in the intro that like, you know, if you say sparkly vampire, it's the first time that the vampire's been reimagined, like, in the popular consciousness since Dracula. And so it's very interesting, I think, to think about the idea of, like, so, like, what is essentially the vampire? Because I think, I've mentioned before, obviously it's a fantasy. But it's interesting in the way that it's not, you know, obviously there are a lot of things that go into it that, kind of make us kind of subtly forget that this is a work of fantasy. Like the kind of writing style and the kind of the way that time is represented and stuff like that, which I might get into later, but anyway. But also like the way that vampires like manifest like in their bodies, so they're not really presented as kind of like this supernatural being. They're presented as kind of like,
I think they're creatures. I think a lot of the time they are, especially the Cullen family, are creatures of taste. Like, I think they really... I love
that. They're not supernatural, they're creatures
of taste.
They are creatures of taste. But, I mean, Stephenie Meyer, in her intro to Life and Death, describes them as superheroes. Not literally, but there's this sense that they're not like kind of this ineffable they're not magical in this way. They're kind of like easily explained through science, which is where we get a lot of Carlisle being like, well, I think it might be this.
What is Carlisle's theories?
So like, well, it's sort of, well, we're starting, like, it's sort of presented in that, like, you know, they're meant to be hunters of humans, and kind of Edward goes on talking about, like, you know, everything about me is designed to draw you in. Like, he, like, smells really good, he obviously is super handsome, and, you know, he's super hot, he sparkles, which is meant to be another thing, which is meant to, like, attract people to you, like, in terms of, like, and it's almost in, like, he speaks about it in, like, almost, like, evolutionary terms. Like, there's a lot, like, this kind of sense that, like, the vampire is, like, an evolution in kind of, like the evolution of man kind of thing, like almost in, you know in like X-Men, you have, like the mutants and stuff like that. There's this this implication, which,
so it's described in squarely human terms, really.
Well, kind of, yeah. I mean, it's very much like broad gestures,
right? I'm with you.
But the way that it's described, you can kind of get the sense that, like, this is something which has evolved scientifically to hunt humans.
Right.
And obviously, you know, as if you could outrun me, all of that. Super strength, super speed, essentially superhuman. And then there's also this problem with the kind of superpowers.
The gifts, the special gifts.
Which is the part where this theory kind of falls down.
Yeah.
Because obviously Edward can read minds, Jasper can alter emotions, Alice can see the future, and so Carlisle's theory is that, like, whatever the vampiric state, and this is a very, like, common trope in vampire fiction, is like the vampiric state heightens whatever humans
you were.
Yeah, whatever you were as a human, it's kind of like heightened, which is again like plays into this kind of like superhuman theory.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the implication is that like Edward is particularly sensitive to what people are thinking, or like I guess he's just very intuitive, I guess would be the implication, and so that's like heightened. Alice,
what about Jasper then? Because Jasper's not exactly a barrel of laughs. Like...
No, but I think it's kind of like, you know, have you ever met someone who's just like really like just charismatic and could just like take you along for the ride?
But
you know?
that's not Jasper.
No, but I think he's kind of like, he has like, when Bella's in his presence, he's apart from the fact that he's a potential killing machine and has the worst control of all of them, when this isn't necessarily an immediate threat in their friendship, he's just one of those people who like makes you feel really comfortable. I guess he's like,
I think he is described as doing that, but like we don't. Yeah, I guess so.
I guess in his human life, when he wasn't so racked with like,
he must have been a Confederate that would have been nice to have been around.
I mean, we'll get into this. Yeah, I mean, he's got a questionable backstory, but, you know, I'm sure there were some nice ones, and I think the implication is that Jasper was one.
Jasper was just as a man, he was probably kind of nice.
Probably kind of nice. And
everything else that he stood for.
Well, like, I mean, if we're looking at the history, like, it probably would have been drafted, so it wouldn't necessarily have been his choice. Anyway, we won't go into that absolute mind.
Yeah.
In an area of history that, like, I'm not super confident on. I did have a phase that I went through where I got really into, like, spaghetti westerns and like
I love a spaghetti western.
Super into the American Civil War when I was like 17.
Mine was squarely into like watching Zorro movies, even the bad ones.
Zorro's great.
Zorro's great.
I really love Zorro. But yeah, I don't feel like that was sufficient for me to comment on Jasper's political state. But anyway, yeah. I think the implication is that he's just very he's good with people.
He's good with people. Let's leave it at that. He's good with people.
Alice is potentially, like, you know, a little bit psychic. So they bring these things into the present. But then you get... So it's kind of like, okay, well, this isn't necessarily magic. This is sort of like, you know, again, like this kind of heightened, maybe could be potentially like, you know, evolutionary kind of...
trait.
Yeah. You know, obviously it is magic, but like, you know, is still like within that parameter. But then you get then you get the girl who could electrify people.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Shock people like, with a touch.
Was she just like, did she just rub loads of balloons on her in her human life? Is that what she's saying?
She liked to grab electric fences.
Yeah, maybe that's, yeah. And then there's the one who can, like, make you, like, see things that aren't there.
Yeah.
The guy, Ben, who can, like, manipulate the elements.
Yeah.
What?
If I was Bella, I would be pissed that I got shield.
Yeah.
I would be pissed. If people can literally play with, like, he, like, whip up a wind and, like,
I'd like Jasper's power more than Bella's.
I would, if I could pick any of the Cullens' powers, I would pick... Does Esme have anything? No,
I don't think so.
Rosalie doesn't. Emmett doesn't.
Oh, it implies. Oh.
Rosalie doesn't, does she?
No, Rosalie doesn't.
She's just hot.
She's just super hot.
She's just hot. Emma. Bloody hell! Write that. Emma and Rosalind. I don't know.
There's like, hang on. While you're saying that, I'm just going to find this bit in the book because I just went over something and I just want to quote it, but keep going because I think it's relevant.
I can't. Yeah, like Rosalie and Emma don't have any powers, but their only power, I guess, is being just like the baddies of the Cullen family. Like Rosalie's just very hot. Emmett's, you know, a bit of a. He's like, you know, very masculine. Could you
imagine Rosalie's Instagram account today?
Oh, she would have been. If I feel like. I want Rosalie to rebel against Carlisle and be like, I want to eat people, and I want to go on Instagram, and I don't want to go to school anymore.
People. I want to adopt a human child, and I don't want to go to school anymore, and I want to live with my fucking husband, please.
This sucks.
God. And I don't want you fucking judging me for it. Okay, no, so there's a bit here, and this is, I'm reading this from Life and Death, so this is with the names of the like alternative.
Oh, I
gender
forgot they'd all
counterparts.
be quote unquote gender swapped as well.
So this is like theoretically like what they all brought into the next life,
right?
As per Karine / Carlisle's theory. So
Right.
Karine brought her compassion. Ernest, which is Esme, brought her his ability to love passionately, which is shit.
That is a shit. That's a terrible power.
Eleanor, and it also like when you're reading it like as Esme, like when like Edward's reading Esme's mind, it just comes off in this really like frazzled desperation. Like he's just like, oh my god, I'm so happy for my son. He's finally found someone. Oh my god! Like, so,
I love it. Like, is that in the gender swapped one as well? You're saying that in that one, that's where like he's reading Esme's mind. She's like, I'm so happy for my son. I love him so much.
No,
I love this idea.
Yeah,
That's almost like brain fried housewife Esme. Like she's just like pouring like. She's trying to pour like tea and just like pouring it all over the floor. And, like, Carlisle just comes in and like takes off his like doctor's jacket, hangs it up, and is like, "Hello, darling." And then walks down.
Is covered in blood.
Walks down, presses a book in his bookcase. It opens up to this like terrifying like apothecary lab where he comes in and pours 2 vials.
Well, the thing is that like it's described like Esme like almost never leaves the house. She doesn't like engaging in humanity. She's just like, I just want to make a nice home for my family. And
Italian food.
Yeah, she's just like constantly like redesigning all of their houses because she's just like, it's really bizarre. So yeah, that's her ability to love passionately.
It's really making me laugh.
Emmett brought his strength, which is again like kind of shit.
Yeah, and that's already
especially when Bella like ends up being really much stronger than him.
Yeah,
and like is not strong in real life.
Yeah, and can resist the allure of blood that we're shown as well.
Yeah, exactly. Royal his ... tenacity. So that's Rosalie.
Right.
Tenacity. ...
tenacity as well.
So
Stephenie!
much shade! So much shade
God!
towards Rosalie. Or you could call it his pig-headedness.
Even as a man, she still gets the sharp end of the stick.
She chuckled. That was Edward chuckled. But what's her name in this? Edith.
I love how you're more over halfway through. You're like, who the hell are these characters?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing is that like Stephenie Meyer makes a point being like the reason she wrote this book is because she was like, I want to prove that this has nothing because obviously there's a lot of backlash being like this is very stereotypical gender roles. She was like, I want to prove that it's absolutely no different if they're different if it's completely gender swapped, and the reality is it's completely different. Like, she's like, she gets to the end of the book and she's like, it's absolutely no different at all. See, ha ha ha, and it's like it's so different. So Jessamine Jasper is very interesting. She was quite charismatic in her first life, able to influence those around her to see things her way. Now she's able to manipulate emotions of those near her, calm down a room of angry people, for example, or excite a lethargic crowd, conversely. It's a very subtle gift, she says.
I see.
So that's Karine's theory, is that it's like brought Karine. Carlisle.
Karine is a shit name.
I don't know where it is. Karine. I don't know where to put.
Karen.
Karen's theory. Karen as a female Jesus figure. Yeah. So like, anyway, the point of this is that there's a very interesting denomination. When it comes to magic here, but also like vampire physiognomy is like very interesting. And we should compare it at this point to the werewolves.
Yes.
The wolves.
The wolves.
I feel like the wolves often get overlooked.
Yeah, I think they do. I'm a wolf fan.
I'm
an advocate. I'm an advocate for wolves.
You were so excited in your wolf Halloween costume that you sent me yesterday. Are you going as a wolf tonight?
I think so. I think I'm either going to go as a wolf or I'm going to go as a slasher, because it got to this point and I was like, we didn't make the Bowser costume, so I'm just going to pick out. And I sent all my cosplays home with my parents because I was like, I don't need these up here. So I can't even pull something that's actually good from my box.
Well, I'm looking forward to see it anyway. But yeah, the wolves, which are not actually werewolves. No. Let's start with that. So they're actually shapeshifters, which we only find out brush over in like the last chapter of Breaking Dawn. So again, like, definitely, absolutely one of the more interesting points of the books is the Quel'u legends that she gets told. And we just don't hear enough about them.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I'm trying to remember broadly, but like they had this ability to shapeshift and to like become spirit warriors. That's it. So they like become these spirit warriors, and then that's how they used to like thwart their enemies, and that was like really scary. And then one time, like one of them gets like trapped in the body of this wolf, and that's like how it all begins. And then further down the line, they come into contact with vampires, and that's how like the gift is passed on. And so they're not actually werewolves. They're shifters who happen to turn into wolves. But werewolves do exist in this universe. We get a very, very brief allusion to that, I think, from Arrow, who's like, they're not werewolves, because werewolves only change by the cycles of the moon.
So is that implied that werewolves do exist?
Werewolves do exist in this universe, yeah.
These just aren't werewolves.
These just aren't werewolves.
Where are my werewolves?
These are shapeshifters, yeah. And this is what I was reading about on that journal entry that I was reading when you came in. Because I'm writing my dissertation on Twilight, listeners, I was pointed it in the direction of one of my teacher's old students who now has a PhD and studied lycanthropy in Twilight. And I was reading one of her essays that she was writing, and there's she makes a really good point that like werewolves as like what's the word, like a metaphor for like puberty is obviously like very common in terms of like associating like the wolf with the child, which is like destructive and passionate, and like is impulsive, versus like the adult, which is like the rational humour, which is like capable of like making sensible decisions and stuff. And these two are kind of like forced into one, and that is kind of what the werewolf generally represents in very broad strokes in YA fiction. But like it's interesting in Twilight because there's obviously like, if Jacob's obviously pitted against Edward, and the wolves are pitted against the vampires. And so it kind of creates this kind of like, well, the werewolves are kind of like, the vampires are obviously like superhuman, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
The wolves are also superhuman, and there's this, there's a lot of rhetoric around especially in New Moon, when Bella is like watching Jacob like kind of like go through this metaphor of puberty changing into like this werewolf, where he keeps going through like all these growth spurts and stuff, and she describes how like huge he's getting, and oh my god, he's so big, and oh my god, he's suddenly grown loads of hair, and and so like obviously he's like superhuman in the sense that he obviously poses an immediate threat to her like physical safety, but he's also like less than human because he is part animal. And obviously like control, as we've kind of briefly touched on in this, is one of like a very big theme for these characters, and like self-control. You see it in a lot of YA fiction actually, but like the idea of self-control, and like there's points at which Edward and Lee lose self-control. Carlisle has amazing self-control.
Yeah.
Sam Yulee the werewolf loses control and does violence against his fiancée. And so there's this sense that like the animal, like the wolf, in them is kind of less than human.
Yeah.
And so it kind of puts them it like puts the wolves and like especially like Jacob's position in this real like sort of swinging pendulum between like kind of rational humanity and like complete and utter like total depravity and violence. Which is interesting when you consider that all the wolves, like, you hear them in, like, you're in their heads at some points, and they think like normal people.
They do. And, like, yeah, representations, like, in the films, like, when you're shown, it's, like, similar to where they can all hear each other's thoughts, which I think is a very interesting comparison to, like, Edward. Is it implied that Edward has to hear everyone's thoughts all the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go,
yeah. Well, I'm sure Jacob and him could talk about that. Like, I'm sure they could work something out about that.
Have a lot in common.
Yeah, like, you both like the same girl. You're both, why don't you two shack up?
I mean, there's been a lot of, like, literature on, like, how gay they are for each other.
Yeah.
And how, like, Bella's just this pinpoint in the middle for them to, like, act out their homoerotic desires on. Which I really like. I think, it's just... And I mean, it has been posited, and I want to ask your opinion on this, that this is kind of like a racial implication, that like the animal is sort of like, you know, its own, like the wolf is only associated obviously with the Quellites, this Native American people, and so like, and obviously like I was just saying, like there seems to be a more of a danger, not of like completely like losing control with the wolves.
Yeah.
And so like because there is like a point where like like someone describes him as like I think it's Jacob himself, who describes himself as like a big black monster, like referring to his wolf.
Oh my
obviously,
God!
That can be very much taken out of context.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to think, like, what is your opinion on like the representation of like the people in Twilight?
I do think it is racialized. I also do think that like obviously like the stories and the symbols and the mythologies are taken from like the actual Quelite people who received no royalties for their representation of their mythologies in the book or the film. So I think it has real political, economic repercussions for the decisions that she's made. And I do think that she did go, and I don't think she did it, I would say, maliciously, but I do think she has written not a pretty racist portrayal of, not extremely racist, not flagrantly racist. I do think
flagrantly, but not flagrantly.
I will say I think it is racialized, insensitive, and I do think one of the biggest issues is the representation of these actual mythologies these movies and these books are so successful and have earned so much money that the Quelite people never saw, which is, I think, the real thing that I think actually is the most concerning. And that's down that.
Yeah, I don't really know. I always like because I know a lot of people like always like said it was like kind of problematic. I never quite understood why, from just having like read the book.
Yeah.
Like obviously there are like hints of it, but I don't think it's as bad as it could be. In terms of like literally,
That's what I feel like.
in terms of literally the representation, like literally just thinking about the representation in the books.
In the
like,
books, okay, yeah, in the books.
I don't think it's the worst possible representation that could.
You and me being like, she did a soft racist.
Yeah.
She did a soft racism, which is still racism, but she did a soft racism.
I think I can feel her concern for like.
I think she's trying
to portray these people.
I don't
think she hit the
did
mark.
it. Oh no!
Well, I think I feel that was something that she was trying.
I think as well
to.
this notion that he's especially in considering the way that like sexual desire is represented between Edward and Jacob, the way that he is shown to be kind of like Edward is then sort of necking on and he's like stop and jumps away, compared to Jacob's kind of like sexual aggression from him constantly being naked in the films and in the books, and two, like the way him forcefully kissing Bella, and like, which is very fucked up. Also, Charlie's reaction to that is awful. When Charlie's just like, that's just bloody Bella, like
down,
boys, yeah. And it's like, no, Bella just got kissed without her consent by her best friend. I also don't feel like she reacts enough to that either. But I think Smear's decision to make him do that, forcefully kiss her on the mouth, I think, amongst like, you know, other representations of wolves as being out of control and all the rest of it, and sort of like constantly hurting their significant others, but being bound to them, but unable to behave like kind of
completely civilized people,
completely civilized men,
humans,
let's say,
yeah.
like in comparison to Edward's like, I will not lay a finger on your body until we get married, I think just seems racially charged to me.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I think there's something very interesting about like you were saying, Jacob's comparative sexual aggression. Because obviously, like, there's been you know, a lot of, like, you know, if we think about, like, where the kind of, like wolf human story, like, has its roots, like, in terms of, like, general mythology, then, like, Little Red Riding Hood is, like, the main one. And there's obviously so much about Little Red Riding Hood being, like, a kind of, like, whether you read, like, the traditional Grimm's versions or whether you read, like, Angela Carter's versions, it's always kind of, like, the Wolf's Princess is, like, this either external or internal, kind of uncontrollable drive towards, like, sexual, and, like, the wolf kind of presents this, like dangerous, potentially dangerous, should we say, like, masculine sexuality.
This intrusion into the domestic,
which Little Red Riding Hood only finds when she kind of wanders off the path. And so, you know, like, when you think of it in those terms, like, Edward is the definition of a path, not just because he's fucking boring, but also because he's, like, so, like, by the book, like, and, like, you know, like, I think it would have been a much kinkier story, and in a way it kind of has the kind of allusion to it if she'd have gone for Jacob, who kind of, like you say, like, does present, like, this very kind of, like, aggressive in terms of, like, not, like, aggressive in terms of, like, necessarily dangerous all the time, but just, like, affronting sexuality, which, like, he grabs
her at a wedding as well. Do you know, like, I don't know if that is in the books either, but, like,
I don't think it is, but I think it's very, like, Jacob in the books is so much nicer than Jacob in the films. They had to do a lot of work to make him more of a dick. Just because Edward is so much of an asshole.
Taylor Lautner's such a bad actor as well, though. Not to hate, but I don't think that Taylor Lautner.
I don't think it's necessarily his acting that annoys me. It's his voice.
It's like,
oh my god.
Well, that's his acting.
It's so annoying.
The vocal part of his acting fucking
it's just, like,
sucks.
Sounds like his old voice is constantly.
Do you want me to put you in the hospital?
Like, it's just like, oh my god, breaking.
Sorry, Taylor Lautner. If you're listening, imagine.
No shade. but so, like, I think, Basically, the wolves are very sexual. I think, again, that does present a danger to Bella, and that, like I was saying earlier, like, how the sex between her and Edward never really happens.
No.
It kind of begins to encroach upon that in Jacob, and that's when he kind of forcefully kisses her, and that's when it becomes, like, a threat, and it, you know, it's this thing that really, like, affects their friendship.
And then Charlie, her father, who is a police officer, which is, I think, looking at Law and Order, I think in the Twilight series would be really interesting, especially comparing, like, the Volturi to, like, poor Charlie. I think, again, if anyone wants to write an essay comparing the sort of legislative power of, like, the Forks Police Department versus the Volturi, I would read the shit out of it.
Well, now that you've said that, I actually think it's quite interesting just thinking about it, that, like, most of the law enforcement seems to be directed towards containing the wildlife of Forks, and like, how, you know, it's like whenever there's a vampire in town, they're like, oh my god, it's another bear, or like, oh, there's a,
and it's like,
there's been another animal attack, and it's like Charlie gets all his people and goes out and searches for them. But the way that you can kind of align that with, like, the way that the wolves are sort of presented, as, like, Law and Order seems to in this world seems to actively want to suppress this kind of, like, animalistic nature, which is something which is perpetuated by all the characters throughout the book. That's, like, something that people accept in this world, is that it's kind of, like, it's one has to be controlled. You have to be self-controlled. That's the thesis. And I think it's really interesting. I was thinking about this. This isn't necessarily really relevant, but I think it's so weird that that's so prevalent in so much YA fiction, this idea of, like, being self-controlled. I know you haven't read it yet, but I keep telling Jamie to read the Sarah J Maas
you do
ACOTAR books.
You do. I will do it.
There is such a heavy narrative of, like, having to control the inner beast, and like having to be in control all the time, and this like someone please write in and tell me why they think this is so prevalent, because I really can't wrap my head around why in a book for young... Maybe it's because it is a book for young girls, and the threat of teenage female sexuality is so potent in the minds of society that only narratives which purport this kind of level of self-control are acceptable to us. I don't know if that's too much of a stretch to make, but I just think it is weird that it's so common.
I think it's also, you know, like you said, marketed to young girls who are, at this point, I do honestly believe going through, quote unquote, the important part of the schooling process, where it's impressed upon you that like self-control and like self-management and stuff are essential skills to succeed in adulthood. Yeah. So like to see characters that you identify with or like have a desire to become, exhibit this kind of like strength or bravery. Not even strength or bravery, because very seldom I would say they're brave, but they don't exhibit much strength, I would personally say, but they do have a lot.
It was so strong.
They do have a lot of. Actually, I think Bella has a lack of self-preservation.
Yeah, she really does.
But very, there is this real concern for self-control. But it is all about sacrificing yourself for others and thinking about others.
It's very Christian, but it's also very interesting how, like, the last book, were it not for the fact that they get married in the beginning, kind of allows them to brush over the fact that it's essentially a story about the ramifications of teen pregnancy.
It is! It is!
And, yeah, like, no one, really thinks about, like, it's kind of not presented in that way because, by that point, she's kind of becoming a vampire, she's an adult, she's experienced this sexual experience, and therefore she's kind of like a woman, quote unquote.
We could probably describe every single Twilight book with the ramifications of X. Like the first book would be like the ramifications of dangerous driving. The second would be like, I don't know, the ramifications of high school breakups. I don't know what the third one would be. That's breaking dawn. The ramifications of accidentally killing someone's boyfriend, leading them to start an army. I guess, like, I was gonna say like fidelity. Yeah, because there's like a lot of. I mean, if that's where like that's the moment where things between Jacob and Bella kind of become very complicated. Yeah. And it's also, it kind of runs parallel to the storyline of Victoria, who's kind of like seducing Riley. Yeah. Who's not, the love of her life because she's so revengeful. So I guess there is something about fidelity there. And then we get Jasper's little backstory where he's talking about how he was like, essentially groomed into that in situation with those two vampiric women, which is supposed to mirror Riley's, I think. Isn't that how it went? That's how it... I can't even remember. They're like... Yeah, he is essentially groomed. Yeah, because he can control their emotions. Yeah. He, like, is kept as, like, their leader / lover of Maria. Why does he get kicked out again? He leaves. Oh, he just goes. He decides to leave. Yeah, he chooses. Good for him. He chooses another Good for him. Yeah, so I think... I just want to touch on the ramifications of dangerous driving. Just briefly, because it is interesting, the motif of the Volvo. I feel like I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but I probably forgot. But, like, the Volvo is such... It's a character in its own right. It's constantly mentioned. I don't know if I ever saw my boyfriend's car I could name it as being a Volvo or not. No. Bella knows it's a Volvo, I don't know. But she constantly refers to it. She loves, like, cars, doesn't she? She loves, like, it's like... Her Chevy. She loves the motorbike moment she has. She keeps getting on motorbikes. Yeah. She loves it. She absolutely loves it. Oh my god, grease monkey, Bella. But the Volvo, as a motif, as a representation of, like, a family, a safe, typical family vehicle, which is kind of, like, caught in this kind of, it's made almost abject in the sense that it's, like, it's meant to represent this kind of, like, normal, safe family car, completely ordinary, nothing to see here, and that's why they drive it and not Rosalie's, like, flash. Rosalie's really into mechanics. I just remembered this. She is, like, the mechanic of the family. That's her. She goes and just works on her car. She's like, when she's stressed, she's like, I'm just gonna go work on my car. She goes, I've gotta get out of here. Some mechanic stuff. I think is really cool. But anyway, yeah. But yeah, made abject because it's this family car.
that's meant to help them blend in, and that they apparently like chose deliberately to exude this kind of like normal family lifestyle. But it's obviously like too flashy for like what you couldn't just buy like a secondhand car. Like they had to buy new. Again, they are materialistic. Like, I don't care what you say, Bella. They do care about money.
Yeah, they do.
And but like it's abject thing. Because it's too flashy and kind of like it's still out of place for being this kind of shiny new car, which is meant to represent safety, but obviously carries a truckload of vampires, which Edward is constantly speeding in.
Yeah.
I just think that's an interesting.
Or like Emmett's jumping on the roof and stuff, and it's like,
oh my god, the
poor Volvo.
I can't decide whether I love or hate that moment in the film where like they ride and Emma's just stood up in the back of his Jeep like for no reason in his white hoodie, gilet. The costume department really did him dirty.
They did. They dressed him like
everyone
shit.
else looked great, and Emma just looked like shit.
And it's not bad looking. I don't know who the actor is, but I don't think he's necessarily awful looking at all.
I think he's quite a good Emmett.
Good looking young man for an Emmett.
Young man. They gave him those clothes.
Yeah, a white hoodie.
The all white ensemble. Like the white zip up and the wife beater he wears.
He looks terrible. such a bad fit.
And all the jewellery. Like he's got like massive bracelets on. I remember when that came out in 2008 and I was like, I remember being like, that looks shit.
Yeah.
And that was when that stuff was meant to be cool.
It does look like shit.
Yeah.
It truly does.
Oh, God. Anyway, stop taking the bitch. Right, we're back, listeners. We had a brief conversation about how we're going, because we've got so many notes and we're already on the 2-hour mark.
Yeah.
So what we've decided is we're going to do a Twilight Part 2. So, basically we're going to come back for that. Wrapping up thoughts for this is basically...
Shit's crazy.
Shit's crazy and fun. We're so bad at outros.
Yeah, I don't know how... We don't know how to wrap it up, other than...
It's also going to be so janky because it's going to be like we've finished on a thought and then we're going to be like, right, we're back and we're not doing any more.
I don't know. I feel like we ended on a pretty solid. Like, you know, we were talking about the ramifications. I don't think we did, or I don't think we got to the ramifications of Eclipse. So, did viewers, if you.
No, we did because that was the ramifications of Fidelity.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, we will talk more about that in the next episode. I'm not even going to try and imagine when that's going to come out.
Yeah,
but it will come out.
It will come
Dracula.
out.
But next time we'll do Twilight Part 2. I mean, we didn't do any prep for this, so there's no reason that we would need to prep for the next one either. So
exactly.
Hopefully we'll be back soon. In the meantime, email in. You can always email in as per on the Vampire Book Club at gmail.com.
Please
Be in the show notes. Please do. Oh my god. I was looking. We're still, like, even though we've been gone for like months, we've still had like 300 listeners over the last month. So you are out there.
Please tell us.
So, like,
our thoughts aren't that.
Aren't that. Tell us what you think. We want to know. So yeah, email us more about
your thoughts,
Twilight, or just the podcast in general. Doesn't have to be related to what we've said. You can tell us how shit we are. Please don't do that. Or you could send us an email about Dracula, because we will be doing that again soon.
Yes.
And in the meantime, happy Halloween.
Stay spooky.
Stay spooky. And we'll see you soon. Bye. Bye.